Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. In a significant step towards strengthening India's inter-parliamentary engagement with the world, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla has constituted parliamentary friendship groups with more than 60 countries across continents. The idea is simple but powerful. That is, to take diplomacy beyond governments and into legislatures, enabling direct dialogue between the elected representatives. Coming in the backdrop of India's recent multi-party diplomatic outreach post-Operation Sindoor, the formation of these groups reinforces a powerful message that when it comes to issues of national interest, India speaks in one voice. So how will these friendship groups function? What difference can parliamentary diplomacy really make? And how can lawmakers help shape India's global partnerships in a rapidly changing world? We'll explore some of these aspects and more on the show today. Joining us with their perspectives are two guests. Mr. Shashank Mani, he's a member of parliament from the BJP, represents the Devariya constituency in Uttar Pradesh in the 18th Lok Sabha. Mr. Shashank Mani, thank you for joining us. Glad that you could take out time to join us for this conversation. We're also joined by Mr. Sandeep Phukun, senior journalist. He brings with him decades of experience covering parliament and politics. Mr. Phukun, always a pleasure to welcome you on our conversations. So to begin with, let me congratulate you, Mr. Shashank Mani, for being part of one of the friendship groups to the USA. I recall we had a conversation when you represented India post-Operation Sindoor in one diplomatic outreach effort by the government. Now you're also part of a friendship group that's been constituted by the Lok Sabha Speaker. To begin with, help us and our viewers understand, how do you think these friendship groups will complement the traditional diplomatic efforts that are led by the government?
Firstly, I want to thank the Honourable Speaker and the Honourable Prime Minister for giving me this opportunity. It was a privilege to represent India at a time when Operation Sindoor had just been conducted. I was also fortunate to go to the United States amongst other countries. And it's really a privilege to be part of the Indo-US parliamentary group, which will play a consequential role in both of these countries forging better ties. I think, as you said in the opening statements, the purpose of this group is to supplement and complement what the diplomatic corps does. Usually diplomacy is done between governments, but when people's representatives meet, there's an opportunity to present direct people-to-people representation. And my observations, coming from the short experience of about 15 days I had in that fairly profound tour across 5 different nations, I think when you have a senator or a legislator meeting another parliamentarian from India, hearts and minds both meet. It's important to say that we are perhaps more expressive in the way that we present our points of view. There were a number of emotional moments when we described what had happened in Pahalgam, as well as the force with which we could carry the voices of our people to other countries. I think when 1.4 billion people represented by 543 parliamentarians takes a message across the continents, let's say to the United States, there is a listening voice. And we felt that many of the senators and congressmen that at least I met while I was in Washington, D.C. during this visit were very, very interested in what we had to say. We, of course, also met with the Undersecretary of State and the Vice President. But I felt that the biggest gaps which were filled by this parliamentary delegation in Sindoor, but also will be filled going forward with this Indo-parliamentary delegation, Indo-US parliamentary delegation, and other delegations, is this meeting of hearts as much as meeting of minds. When people talk to other people, I think the new bond forges. No doubt we'll discuss this more, but that's my first reaction to your question.
Certainly. We'll come back and understand how you're going to function, what are some of the objectives that you're going to carry with you when you engage with elected representatives of other legislatures across the world. But Mr. Phukun, coming now to you for your perspective, as somebody who's covered Parliament, as somebody who's seen these delegations taking place, such kind of outreach efforts, but now the fact that this is being institutionalized, our efforts in parliamentary diplomacy are being institutionalized at such a scale, how significant is it? To begin with, it's 60 countries, but I'm sure the Secretariat is making efforts to cover more and more countries in the times to come.
I think it's one of the finest moments in our parliamentary democracy, because do remember that many of these delegations, for example, the delegation that Shashankji was part of was led by a Congress MP, the principal opposition party. And they went on an outreach effort, essentially conveying that when it comes to the country's security, sovereignty, then there is no, the lines between the opposition and the ruling party dissolve. Yes. So we speak as Indians. We speak as, stakeholders of the future of our country. And whether I belong to X party or Y party, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to the security of our citizens, we are all one. So that was the significant message that the earlier parliamentary group sought to convey across several nations. And this is, as you rightly said, this is being institutionalized. And let's also remember that many a times in Parliament, for example, take the parliamentary standing committees. Okay, many a times you have parliamentarians taking on the floor of the House, they take very strong positions depending on what their party line is. But when they discuss the same bill and the same provisions of the bill inside a parliamentary committee, then all kinds of views are accommodated. Yes. And eventually what you get is a very well distilled piece of product where all kinds of suggestions come in, and the government often is open to accepting those changes, those recommendations of parliamentary committee. That's the beauty of the parliamentary system. So I would say that this is an extremely significant and a welcome development where leaders across political lines will represent and also remember, as Shashankji rightly said, that diplomacy is conducted from government to government. I mean, it's between government and one government and another government. But these parliamentary delegations also, get that elbow room to negotiate. What we often call in diplomatic circles, they call it as back channel talks. So if it's a tricky issue, then these delegations would be extremely helpful to convey India's position or difficulties. For example, this comes at a time when the whole world is actually facing, both in terms of tariff and trade deals, uncertainty, as well as rising tensions in different parts of the world. So I would say that this is an extremely welcome development, where our parliamentarians can actually articulate many of the things that the government may find itself, may find it difficult to commit itself to.
That's right. In fact, the release that the Speaker's office, handed over soon after the announcement was made, it does categorically mention that beyond parliamentary procedures, the members in the friendship groups are expected to take up issues like trade partnerships, like the geopolitical issues of mutual and global interest. How these will play out with different countries, of course, that is up to the members. We will come to that, but you touched upon a very important, remarkable and commendable feature of the friendship groups. I'll take that to Shashankji first. The fact that it brings together members from various political parties. You've been part of such a delegation which was so diverse. Based on your experience, how important do you think is political diversity in delegations like these in strengthening India's voice globally, especially when we are putting our point across? How important is it to give out that message that on issues of national interest, we stand as one?
Yes, and most foreign policy issues and relationship with other nations essentially bring Indians together across political spectrum, across other divisions that sometimes we may have in local politics. But let me also say that one reason that this parliamentary group is doubly important is the times have changed. Over the last, you can sense, 3 to 4 years, there's been some hardening of arteries across the world in terms of international relationships. And therefore, it's important that not just diplomats who convey a point of view of the government, but across party lines, different factions talk about the country in one sphere. It doesn't mean that we have to agree on every nicety, but mostly there is consensus amongst different political parties when they go outside. There are a few exceptions, but mostly that is the case. And therefore, I want to make one other point that in a time when politics internally has become so important, conveying that point of view as to what political damage some statement from a global leader may make to our leader is also critical. Because as you can imagine, many of the deals that are happening now are also posturing to local political constituencies. And therefore, it's important to have this other dialogue which brings across the political strength of what may a trade deal entail and what it means. For instance, some segments that we would like to preserve in our trade deal, some segments that parliamentarians or congressmen or senators and the US would like to do. So this back channel is not just about softening, but also presenting a much more holistic point of view as to what are the possibilities politically to each person. And I also feel that there is a lot of cultural exchange that happens. And I'm very privileged that these two great democracies, one very long, one very big, are both coming together now to, in some ways, be a bulwark against some of the more authoritarian tendencies globally. So I'm very happy that this kind of parliamentary delegation is happening, not just across party lines, but also conveying a political point of view, which many senators, many congressmen understood when we were there to present Operation Sindoor.
So just to try and get a little more sense, Shashank ji, from you on, although it's too early, the announcement has been made just a few hours ago, but what will be some of the most immediate priorities that the friendship groups will undertake when they are engaging with counterparts from other countries?
I mean, I can comment a bit on what I can sense, and I can only sense it because we've just been appointed to this Indo-US Parliamentary Committee. Maybe the three agendas that I see, I mean, this is my personal view, so don't take it as a view that may emerge once we meet and discuss. But one view that comes across is that there is a huge amount of work that both India and United States can do for technology. I mean, the Honorable Prime Minister even said AI means America and India. And that therefore there's one agenda that has already been fructified in the recent AI summit. And the second is on defense matters. Indo-Pacific is of great concern to all of us. We are, in some ways, the Indian Ocean is our backwater, and therefore we must make sure that whatever policies that we formulate for protecting the Indo-Pacific have to be done jointly. I had the privilege recently of calling on the US ambassador, after whom the trade deal has also happened. And perhaps the third is a much more wider people-to-people exchange between these two great nations. I think, for instance, I have been to San Francisco recently. I'm very keen that Devariya, although it's a rural area, also has a space and electronics hub. Can I collaborate across the patch to other parliamentarians there and other Indians there? I also come from an IIT, so I have many friends in the Bay Area. So I would say these are three agendas that come to my mind immediately. And I'm sure that many other countries and many other bilateral groups would have their own bilateral agendas to take forward. But in each of these three, I feel that the voice of the public has to be presented. The voice of the government, no doubt, is important. But how do we loosen up the relationships? So by introducing the human voice, the civil voice, the political voice, which is so critical today in global relationships.
Absolutely. As representatives of the world's largest democracy, you carry a lot of responsibility, especially when it comes to leadership positions in shaping global conversations. We've seen that through the Voice of Global South Summit in the past, through G20 that India chaired back in 2023, through the recently concluded AI Impact Summit, which was the first to be hosted by a Global South country, and the kind of conversations that happened, making it more inclusive, making it more democratic, and ensuring that technology does not create that kind of inequality. Mr. Fukun, how do you see parliamentary diplomacy, and especially in this area, India taking a leadership position, building on the kind of efforts that we have made, and especially in a scenario where there is massive polarization and a geopolitical landscape is currently in fragments, and that's where India comes in big through efforts like these. What kind of tangible outcomes can we expect from measures like these?
See, on the face of it, these are friendship groups, and as Shashankji rightly pointed out, that it'll be people-to-people contact. These are elected representatives. They will have a lot more flexibility than, let's say, the government of the day, because many times you cannot say things openly. As Shashankji rightly said, government, a lot of these public posturing that is happening is also keeping in mind the domestic constituency. For example, in the Trump administration, there is a certain constituency to be addressed back home domestically, and in terms of agriculture. Now, we know that agriculture is an extremely sensitive issue here domestically. So if you ask let's say the Minister of External Affairs spokesperson or any other government ministers, they find it, it'll be difficult for them to commit to anything openly and specifically, or take the matter of, say, buying oil from Russia. These are all spaces where there will be intense negotiation, there will be backdoor negotiation, But what happens is that many of these things can be said publicly without actually hurting diplomatically by these delegations, by public representatives. They have their own points of view. They are elected people. They represent lakhs and lakhs of voters in India. They can make these statements, keep them on the table in the public domain. And many a times it comes to the aid of the government. I will cite you an example from past. And, we all know Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a very, very, smart politician. He knew how to manage coalitions. There came a time when the US wanted India to send troops to Iraq, to the Gulf. And because at that point of time, if you recall that, the narrative was about body bags and how Western countries were losing their soldiers. It was a difficult situation. And I learned this from late Sitaram Yechuri, and he once told me this personally, that it so happened that the Prime Minister's office reached out to K. Natwar Singh, who was again an expert on international affairs, and reached out to Harkisan Singh Surjeet, who was the CPIM General Secretary then. And then between them, they evolved a strategy. A resolution was moved in the Lok Sabha against the move that India should not send troops to Iraq. Right. And thereafter, the situation was resolved. The Prime Minister quoted saying that I cannot go against the Parliament. They've passed a resolution. What the government could not say openly, or because, you cannot also, because it's not a one-off deal. It's a continuum. You keep building on the relationship. So if one thing that proves to be a stumbling block, you have to find a way to negotiate and step aside and move ahead. I think so these delegations would be extremely, in my opinion, would be extremely useful to articulate many points of view, which the government may find itself, find it difficult to articulate so openly, publicly, and take a confrontational position. Diplomacy is actually art of the possible.
That's
As
right.
they say, politics is also the art of the
Shashankji,
possible.
what are your views on this? Can parliamentary dialogue help navigate through complex issues which perhaps the traditional diplomatic tools cannot? And I ask you this because in this age of social media, we're seeing countries, we're seeing leaders even leaking private conversations on social media platforms. So how credible then will such kind of dialogues be in navigating through complex issues more candidly, more informally than the formal channels?
I would see it as a complement to the formal channel, not a substitute. And in no way should we think about encroaching on some of the things that our fine diplomatic services do so well. I think we need to make sure that as the largest democracy of the world, which has to propose its ideas of democracy, I've been working a lot on humanist economics. There are many ideas emerging out of India which are relevant for the whole world, not just the global south, but I think the whole world. We can offer many things which I think the West, as well as the rest of the world, can learn from and therefore benefit. Some of that comes from diplomatic channels, but some of these new ideas emerge from the political process that we do so well across this country. So I think this is a complement to that. There are some nudges that we can give to the formal diplomatic process, as was just recounted. There were some new ideas we can propose. Sometimes the formal bureaucracy, the formal IFS can be a bit more reticent about newer ideas. But finally, we should also make sure that the foreign ministry has enough room to maneuver, and they are seen as a senior partner in this relationship, and we are seen as essentially a complementary service which opens up the so-called the lines of communication, which presents a more emotive point of view, which sometimes balances some of the things that the government can't do, as has been described, which can play the role of an informal channel. And as I said, there's a number of things which are happening, not through diplomatic channels, but through people-to-people engagement, using the very same tools that you just talked about, social media and others. Of course, there is this risk that some off-the-cuff remark by a member of parliament is seen as government's official position. We'll have to be careful about that. No doubt in our own committees, we will have to be trained about that so that we are able to have private conversations with senators, with congressmen, with leaders, but not make it so public and substitute what is essentially complementary service to the government. And I think this whole entire party coming together, the whole of nation approach, when you go out, is extremely important because it brings us together. I saw that when I was in Sindoor, as well as it brings the nation's point of view across the world much more forcefully.
Mr. Fukun, do you think while this initiative is one of its kind being initiated by the Lok Sabha Speaker, we've seen several such measures that he's undertaken in the past to assert India's legislative presence. Do you see this as one concrete build-up measure by the Speaker in asserting a more confident global presence of the Indian Parliament at a time when the geopolitical order is volatile, it's in fragments, and we are now taking a leadership position?
See, the way I look at it, I completely endorse what Shashankji is saying. Look, official policy will be laid down by the government of the
Absolutely.
day. Let's be very clear. There's no doubt about it. But it's they will complement the government's efforts. And when you have senior parliamentarians, say somebody like Mr. Chidambaram, or all these senior leaders who are there, Manish Tiwari. When they go out and meet people, they will be representing India. They will not. I mean, they may be from the principal opposition party, but whether it's a Mr. Derek O'Brien or Abhishek Banerjee or Manish Tiwari or P. Chidambaram, all of them would be representing the Indian parliamentary delegation. And, so it is actually, I agree with Shashankji that, they will also have to get a proper briefing as to what their remit is, what they are supposed to say. It should not be confused with the fact that, it should not be at cross purposes. The government's position is one thing and the parliamentary delegation position cannot be another thing. They'll have to complement the effort of the government. But as I see it, that this is a wonderful way to actually showcase our parliamentary democracy where differences can coexist. Where differences, dissent can coexist. And when it comes to national interest, when it comes to key areas like, technology, economy, the nation speaks as one. I mean, irrespective of and we saw that happen. We saw that happen in Operation Sindoor. For example, DMK has a certain view about language and language policy. But I recall a press conference where Ms. Kanimoyi was asked about her opposition to Hindi, and she said that we speak the language of India and we speak as Indians. So, and I think that was the finest example that one could have given on foreign soil of what parliamentary democracy and parliamentarians can do when they come together for the sake of the nation. I think it's a very fine moment to showcase both our parliamentary democracy and also the fact that plurality of views coexists within the same political spectrum, and they can coexist. They can be very civil. They can disagree on domestic issues at home, but they can agree on issues that matter to India internationally. And as I said, that the timing of these groups are important. I would imagine that the world is currently quite volatile on two counts. Different parts of the world are seeing armed conflicts, and of course the uncertainty with the old WTO trade regime giving way to, more bilateral deals, largely driven by the Trump administration, mainly driven by the Trump administration across the world.
So, goes without saying, both of you have said that these groups are going to align with India's broader foreign policy goals. They're going to work closely with the Ministry of External Affairs. But how do we also leverage this opportunity, Shashankji, this question is for you, in enhancing India's soft power? So through, collaborations with academia, with think tanks, and driving forward this opportunity in terms of complementing our traditional diplomatic efforts, but engaging more closely with institutions that have a larger impact on society, on the people across the world?
Yeah, I think the way I would frame that answer to that question is that a parliamentarian operates at three levels. One is the national level. When we do anything in the parliament, we do not think about just our constituency. we think about what is right for the nation. Of course, taking inspiration from much of the work that we do in our constituencies, but we make laws for the nation, not for our constituency. So at a national level, we have a point of view which we must inform the rest of the world. And I can tell you that the parliament story of India is undersold. We are the largest representation in any time in the history of the planet ever. When we were born as a nation, we were 300 million people and we were 543 parliamentarians, 545 then. Now we are 1.4 billion people and we are 543. This kind of parliamentary load on any parliamentarian, load I would say is more a responsibility, has been unheard of. So when you go outside and talk about 2.8 million population, 2 million voter sets, people fall off their chairs because this is the kind of respect that they have for that number of people. So at a national level, we have respect. At a local level, at a constituency level, each of our constituencies is the size of a country. My constituency, left to right, is 100 kilometers, north to south is 75 kilometers, is the size of Qatar and has got a GDP of 17,000 crores. So then we can talk about to these new parliamentarians across the patch to new countries about ideas that are bubbling up from constituencies. And the third is we are also part of a party, whether it's a BJP, as in my case, or other parties. And therefore, I think we also have an ideological point of view. And this is, I say this with due respect to other nations, we have an amazing ideology where we believe that the benefit of humanity is the benefit of what India does. And therefore, the Vishwa Bandhu idea is something which is better expressed by a parliamentarian who's representing, let's say, 2.8 million people. So I think on all these fronts, one at the national level, one at the local level, and one, I think, at a party level, we are very, very equipped to present a point of view which is very diverse and complements the official point of view. So it's about time that we unleashed the power of these 543 people in a bipartisan manner, because as we've all said, that when you go out, you become bipartisan. And therefore, I think this is a great opportunity to fulfill Prime Minister Modi's vision of projecting our soft power across the world, not just with just cultural missions, which of course are important, but humanistic missions. When you send a parliamentarian overseas, you're sending essentially 3 million people with him overseas. That's the point of view I would have.
I think that's the most powerful message through this initiative that's been undertaken, but through what we've discussed so far also, that at a time when geopolitics is complex, the alliances have become quite fluid, India is trying to invest in something which is far more deeper, which will have a greater long-term impact, and which is to strengthen parliamentary dialogue, to strengthen exchanges which are more rooted in its democratic fabric. That's, I think, the essence of this initiative and what we've discussed so far. Time allows us to take up only that much on the program, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining in with your perspectives. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and share them.